Sometimes I'm not sure what to play. Sometimes patients aren't really sure what they want to hear, so I don't ask about specific music. I ask about mood. I ask about feelings. I ask about ideas. A diagnosis of a life-threatening illness is effectively life-altering. And in moments when things feel exceptionally hard, words sometimes are not enough. But sometimes, a song can do what words alone can't. Some music is so powerful that it transcends time and space. And music that was written 300 years ago can connect to us in a way that feels like it was written just for us.
Today we're going to talk about one of the most famous pieces of music ever written. It's possible that many of you have already heard of this piece because it's been in countless TV shows and movies and commercials. So, almost 300 years ago exactly, a German composer by the name of Johann Sebastian Bach, just about my age at the time, wrote a set of pieces for the cello alone. No other instruments, no accompaniment, just the cello, 4 strings, that's it. This piece is the first one in this set of pieces, and it's simply called Prelude. I'm going to talk about 2 reasons that this is one of the most popular and loved pieces of classical music of all time. The first reason is simple: familiarity. And the second reason is Bach's use of tension and release in the music. So, the first reason that I think this has become one of the most popular pieces of classical music ever written is familiarity. You hear it, you recognize it. Even if you don't know what it is, I think I've heard that somewhere before. Where have I heard that piece? You recognize it instantly because of all those movies and TV shows and commercials all over the world that it's been in. I remember being a kid and listening to the radio with my parents and listening to classical music. Symphonies, concertos, solos, sonatas, and to me, it all just sounded the same, and I had no idea how my dad was able to say, that's Beethoven's Symphony No. 4, that's Brahms' Symphony No. 2, that's Mahler. Composers' names I had never even heard of before, but he knew how to tell them apart, and to me it just kind of sounded the same and a little bit boring. If I said to you, do you know that piece by Johann Sebastian Bach, the German composer? Maybe not. If I said, do you know the Prelude from Bach's Cello Suite No. 1 in G major? Probably not. But if I said to you, do you know that famous cello piece that's been in all those movies? You know the one. Or even if I just played the first 5 seconds of it for you, you might recognize it just from hearing the first 5 seconds, and that's saying a lot for a piece of classical music. I mentioned earlier that it's been heard in all these movies and TV shows and commercials. Just to name a few that I've come across in my own casual viewing, not even looking for them, just watching movies and TV like I normally do. It's been in Master and Commander, Ex Machina, The Soloist, The Pianist. It's been in Family Guy, The West Wing, House MD. It even made an appearance in BoJack Horseman. These are just some examples of North American shows, and I know it's been featured in a ton of shows in Asia and all over the world. And now, when you think of cello and cellists and the most famous cellists or the most popular, the first name that usually comes to mind is Yo-Yo Ma. Now, so many of us have heard of Yo-Yo Ma. He's so loved all around the world, and if you haven't heard of Yo-Yo Ma, maybe go look him up, because he's an amazing musician, an amazing cellist, and an amazing person. But Yo-Yo Ma became really famous through his recordings of these Bach suites for solo cello. He's made multiple versions of them over the years, and what do you think the first track on every one of those recordings is? It's this Prelude. So compare it to some of the other great pieces of classical music. When you open your local symphony's brochure, what are they playing year after year after year? Even if you're not a symphony goer, you know these pieces. Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. Clair de Lune by Debussy. The Four Seasons by Vivaldi. Rossini's opera, The Barber of Seville. The reason these pieces are programmed so often is because we hear them everywhere. We've heard them since we were little kids. We hear them every day in commercials and movies. And this is why these pieces become so popular. Because classical music isn't always easy to listen to, but when we become familiar with it and we hear it over and over again, suddenly it becomes a lot easier to listen to and a lot easier to love. The second reason that this piece of music is so universally loved and considered a masterpiece is this concept of tension and release. The idea of tension and release is found in pretty much every art form. Think of some popular movies that you might like. So maybe you're an action movie fan and you like The Avengers, or maybe you like a romantic comedy like When Harry Met Sally. If those movies had no tension, no conflict, the movie would be boring, right? And the resolution wouldn't be satisfying at all. Imagine if The Avengers was just Iron Man and Spider-Man and Doctor Strange sitting around having lunch, having a coffee, showing each other their superpowers, and the movie's over. No Thanos, no Infinity Gauntlet, no problem, no movie. Imagine Billy Crystal and Meg Ryan in When Harry Met Sally. They go on that road trip together, they realize, ooh, I love this person. They fall in love, they get married, that's the end of the movie, everyone's happy. Boring, right? Well, music is very much the same, but we have to create tension and release with instruments and with notes. As a listener, you don't really need to know how it's done, but if you listen, you can start to hear it. If we listen to the first 10 seconds of this prelude, you can hear the music change. It starts off very nice and relaxing, and then it starts to build. The notes get a little crunchier, meaning they don't resonate together quite so well. We're getting away from the nice major chords in the beginning, only for the music to pull us back to where we started. And that's only the first 5 or 6 seconds of the piece. It happens over and over and over again. Now, technically speaking, Bach is going to different keys, he's bringing us to different places, and this is a whole bunch of music theory and harmony that we don't really need to get into. But if you just listen for moments of tension, moments where the notes don't quite sound right, or they're pulling you in a certain direction of feeling, and then they resolve to something that feels comfortable again, something we recognize. Before we hear a performance of this piece, we would like to share a story with you about how this piece of music has had a profound impact on someone else's life. So here to tell the story is music therapist SarahRose.
I met a man named Rob. He was about 50 years old and he had been battling leukemia for several months. He was awaiting a bone marrow transplant in the hopes that he would have significantly improved quality of life, even a shot at a cure. Rob was quiet, a little tense, a little unsure as to why I came into his hospital room. I carefully introduced myself, explaining that I was the music therapist on the transplant team and I had been referred to him by Laura, his nurse. He was very skeptical. He shrugged when I asked if I could come in and gestured silently to a chair in the corner of his hospital room when I asked him if I could sit down. "I think I'm okay, but you could play something," he said to me quietly. I plugged in my keyboard and asked him about his relationship to music. He told me that he didn't have any specific requests or associations or even preferences. I didn't push it. Instead, I asked if there was a feeling that he was hoping to feel. "Calm," he said. "Just calm." He closed his eyes. I wondered if he was avoiding me, but I took a chance. I began to play slow and quiet chord progressions, watching as his breathing began to relax and slow down. After a few moments of improvising, I began to incorporate a couple of classical pieces into my playing. It almost looked like Rob had fallen asleep. I moved slowly into Bach's Prelude in G major, matching the speed of the music to his breathing. And then I noticed it. A tear was rolling down his cheek. I continued to play, slowly, carefully. More tears. In these moments of visible and often deeply felt emotion, I ask myself whether to continue on or stop and connect and check in. What I usually do is somewhere in between, unless the patient tells me otherwise. I slowed down and finally stopped. A few silent moments passed. He opened his eyes. "I don't really know why I'm crying," he whispered. I paused. "That's okay," I said. "You don't have to know." "That just felt good, especially the last one," he told me. I smiled. "I'm glad," I said. He asked me for the name of the piece, which I shared with him. "Maybe I'll listen to it again, when I'm having a tough day." "There are lots of tough days right now," he told me. "I don't know why, but it makes me feel so much. But maybe I don't have to know, right?" He smiled. I smiled back. Right.